Hi, and welcome to the closing keynote for Library 2.022, Libraries and Privacy. Our closing keynote speaker is Dara Hoffman. Thank you, Dara.
And Dr. Sandy Hirsch for giving me the opportunity to be part of this and to be with you all today and to invite such wonderful speakers. So I am really, really grateful to all of you. And now I get the chance to share some of my thoughts from the day. I thought about doing a PowerPoint, but my PowerPoints tend to be ridiculous presentations full of memes. And for once, I'm going to be serious, as out of character as that is. So today's conference is drawn on the expertise of librarians, archivists, lawyers, technologists, and we've swung from lows, I don't find myself completely in disagreement with Michael Zimmer's earlier tongue-in-cheek burn it all down observation, to highs all underlined by a sense of both curiosity and apprehension. The simple fact is that information professionals, wherever we might work, are deep in the waters of digital data. As we're flailing about, trying not to drown, we might wonder, can privacy save us? Can it help us to serve our patrons, to protect our institutions, or to advance intellectual freedom? And how do we square our privacy commitments with other commitments, such as social justice, and within the reality of resource constraints and fast evolving technology? I'm afraid my answer is that privacy cannot save us. At least privacy alone, as currently conceived, cannot save us. We heard so many perspectives and aspects of privacy today because, as Keeson Kim reminded us, privacy is polysemous. Indeed, almost every work on privacy begins by disclaiming privacy's unknowability, describing its fundamental slipperiness and ability to evade easy definition. American privacy scholar Dan Sullivan writes, privacy is a concept in disarray. Nobody can articulate what it means. As one commentator has observed, privacy suffers from an embarrassment of meanings. Privacy is far too vague a concept to guide adjudication and lawmaking, as abstract incantations of the importance of privacy do not fare well when pitted against more concretely stated countervailing interests. It was as true in 2006 when Sullivan wrote it as it is right now. The definitional challenge is, however, not merely academic. Ronald Krutzinski Jr., another legal scholar, reflecting on the polysemous nature of privacy as a legal term encompassing autonomy, non-disclosure, dignity, reflected on the challenges of transnational dialogue on privacy, which have not at all eased, and reminds us that polysemy is not an evil in and of itself. But when polysemy impedes the attainment of a workable system of global human rights, it becomes essential to find more definite and concrete ways of articulating the fundamental interests we seek to protect. Unfortunately, regarding privacy, the interests sought to be protected are wide-ranging and fact and context dependent, and we do not find such nuanced solutions yet. So are we destined to drown then? No, but given how strong the tides are, we must swim together. Privacy is a huge problem, engaging everything from metadata and training data to law and human rights to cultural competence and intellectual freedom. In no small part because privacy is one of the shields that we try to use to defend ourselves in the face of immense power imbalances and structures, both visible and invisible, that alternatively constrain and enable our actions. As Wayne Unger reminded us, the Western traditions have long anchored their defense of privacy in ideals of self-government, autonomy, and the search for truth, all of which require free access to information. Our idea of the library as an institution also reflects these democratic ideals. These are not small concerns at all, but at the same time, they are far from uncontested. Privacy, after all, can be used as a sword as well as a shield. Historically, for example, domestic violence was considered a private matter, not to be adjudicated or dealt with in a public forum such as a court. There's a long strand of feminist scholarship highlighting the gendered nature of privacy protection. As Kay Royal so succinctly reminded us, privacy is a luxury good. It remains available only to those who can pay, whether it be in time, expertise, or money, and those to whom the systems of privacy are set up to protect and privilege. Kiara Bridges' work has shown that poor mothers, especially poor mothers of color, have long been denied the privacy to which they are ostensibly legally entitled, required to trade deeply personal information in exchange for meager financial support, or to lose their children for material neglect. Is the choice between two intolerable outcomes any choice at all? Unfortunately, as digital technologies have developed, no choice consent has become the standard. If you must have an email to work, to access government services, to pay your bill, how meaningful is it that you consent to the use of your information to receive an email address? Furthermore, the idea of consent-based access to private information is anchored in a specifically Western idea of privacy and liberty. It relies on a framework of individual rights that offers no accounting for community rights. As Rebecca Sosi showed us, our current approaches to privacy and data sovereignty don't take sufficient account of the needs and rights, not just of individuals, but of communities towards their data. Professor Sosi also reminded us that there are critical dimensions of governance and fundamental human rights at stake in doing this work and doing it right. As information professionals, you know that the deep waters in which we're flailing are increasingly stormy. Throughout the pandemic, we were forced to pivot, delivering services for which we've long developed norms and practices for in-person service through digital platforms that mediated those services, turning story time into a trove of data for a third-party corporation to mine, analyze, and profit from. As professionals committed to intellectual freedom, librarians are increasingly finding themselves slandered as groomers, pedophiles, and worse, simply for ensuring that their patrons can access materials that the attackers don't agree with. The former president of the United States has threatened to gut the National Archives and Records Administration for the crime of protecting the trustworthiness and availability of the records for which they have responsibility. In short, we as information professionals are finding ourselves under attack for doing nothing more or less than what our profession demands. However, no matter how many times the waves of crisis wash over us, we cannot let ourselves drown. If we are to reach the shore of a better future, where it is not left to individuals to self-manage their privacy, an impossible goal in the face of the power of corporations and governments, and it gets the inscrutability of technologies that are as accessible to most of us as the Latin Bible was to the medieval peasantry, we must swim with all our might, and we must teach our patrons and stakeholders how to swim as well. In terms of privacy, this means that we need to be constantly reevaluating the way that we approach privacy in both our institutional and digital contexts. We need to consider what it means to use digital tools, however convenient, that are enforcing mediation of our patrons' information and data. We cannot simply be passive recipients. We as information professionals, and as the panel reminded us this morning, we have a critical role to play in the multi-pronged rebuilding of our systems of information in ways that are not just privacy protective or data sovereignty protective, but actually build towards privacy and data justice. And we have a critical role as the people who specialize in that invisible substrate of information in helping people to understand where and how information flows, in providing the data literacy and very differentiated ways that serve the different communities to which we are dedicated, and of course, improving our own practice through, for example, cultural intelligence and humility, especially the humility in listening, as Dr. Villagran reminded us of. We cannot sit back passively. Our role has never been a passive one, but it has long been one that is largely relegated to invisibility. We have long bemoaned, the invisibility of archival work and the invisibility of library labor, as people think that the books just arrive on the shelves and the records are just there waiting for the historians to discover them. We cannot allow that anymore. As much as we wish to shield the rights and power of our patrons by ensuring their privacy, we must be increasingly public in explaining the work we do and why it matters so much, and why we cannot thrive and why we cannot serve even the most base democratic ideals of the field, the most base democratic commitments of our profession to the broader society, unless we can, in fact, ensure that our patrons maintain their privacy and their intellectual freedom, while also understanding that we as a profession have our roots in the broader society, and our systems have not yet reached that stage of maturity where we can say that we know for a fact that we are treating tribal data the way it should be treated, that we know for a fact that our services are respecting the privacy and needs of queer communities as much as they are of cishet communities. There's so much work to be done, and it cannot be done without each and every one of you, every one of us, reaching forward, moving forward, and swimming no matter how choppy the waters might get. And as always, I'm short, but I would love to open it up to your questions. I know that we had a lot to talk about today, and we didn't necessarily get to answer a lot of questions. So I have 15 minutes now for those burning questions that you might all have about today's content.
Thanks, Dara, for jumping right in. I had forgotten to unmute my microphone, and so we didn't give Dr. Chow or Dr. Hirsch a chance to say anything. Do either of them want to jump in and say something at this point?
I'll just jump in and just really quick and just say thank you again to Dara Hoffman for organizing this fantastic conference. I was super inspired and interested in what people had to say, and it was very thought-provoking and insightful comments. So I'm very appreciative of our opening keynote panel, who really gave us a lot of food for thought and generated a lot of active discussion in the chat as well. As Dara said, there are a lot of people had a lot of questions. So I think it's nice that we have a little opportunity now to engage in Q&A. And as always, I want to thank our awesome Steve Pargadon. He always does a fabulous job making sure everything runs smoothly, and also to all of our speakers. But at San Jose State School of Information, we're always very happy to sponsor this event. It's a highlight for us, and we love to engage in these really meaningful conversations with people from around the world. So thank you so much for participating, and I hope we can continue the discussion. And I'll turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Anthony Chow, in case he has any final thoughts he wanted to share as well.
Thanks, Andy. Again, watching the keynote panelists, hearing the enthusiasm at the presentations just reaffirms our commitment to Library 2.0. As Sandy said, I want to thank Dara, Steve, and the entire Library 2.0 and iSchool team who hosted this event. I also wanted to note that we'll be delivering the slides and recordings in virtual reality at some point in the future. So the iSchool is heavily invested in our own VR server, and we do believe that virtual reality, although there's a lot of information privacy and security challenges, is another way to deliver information. And so we kind of envision almost like a VR museum or library of this event in all future events. So just wanted to thank everybody again for attending. We're delighted. Obviously, this issue is something that we're all going to have to work very closely at, and I'm really glad to see all of this discussion. So that being said, hand it over to Dara for any final words.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And I know I often come off as a bit of a Luddite, but you're right that there is so much incredible possibility that we can do with these technologies, but we have to really make sure that we do it in a careful and thoughtful way. So I have a couple of questions here. Indra asks, given the important role and skill sets in the library arts, any thoughts on the library arts community working with the tech industry to include NIST in helping to better address data privacy? I think that's one of the things that we at SJSU do really well. We're right there at the table with a lot of these various technological initiatives, giving that library perspective and that archival perspective. But I think it's critical. We have to have a seat at the table if we're going to ensure that those long-term values of, user-centricness and of democratic ideals, and for archives, trustworthiness and accessibility of records, we have to take that seat at the table if we're going to actually see a better world happen. And then LB has asked, hello, I work with mainly teens. What do you think about protecting the privacy of teens or general youth that use public or academic libraries? I am also interested to know how we can practice cultural humility and consciousness with the 11 to 18-year-old age group. So in terms of youth and teens in general, this is a really important area of privacy research. We're starting to see a lot more legal protections aimed at children. There's a lot of concern about child appropriate and youth appropriate user interface design to make things more privacy protective. But the simple fact is that's a really open problem that we haven't given sufficient attention to. Michelle Villarreal, if you're here, would you like to answer about cultural humility for 11 to 18-year-olds? Oh, I guess she can't talk but that is a question that is more appropriate to Michelle. But I think a lot of it is about, and you're right that youth have their own culture. So a lot of it is about listening and, oh, there's Michelle, yay.
I'm here. I can answer. So I think this is an area where there is a lot of, I would say there's a gap in the research. I don't feel, particularly with this age group, there's an opportunity here. And the earlier we introduce and bring in cultural humility to the earlier youth, the better. Because by the time we're adults, we're running, you know, our show and our career, by then it's almost like second, we don't even think about it. So the earlier we can introduce it, ingrain it, embed it, whether it's through curriculum and, you know, K through 12, if it's in programming, if it's through, you know, partnering with libraries, I think there's a huge opportunity there. And I'd welcome, for that individual, you can email me offline, and I'd welcome having a conversation and continuing it to see what we can do together.
Thank you, Michelle. But seeing no more questions, please do, if you have any questions, thoughts, my email is all over the SJSU website. You can find me quite easily, and I welcome it. These have been really important conversations that we've really just gotten started today. I'm really thrilled that we've had such wonderful sort of cross-disciplinarity discussions today, and I am thrilled to see where we move forward. And until then, just keep swimming.
Thanks, Dara. Thanks to
Thank
San Jose
you.
State School of Information. Thanks, everybody. The recordings will be posted next week. Look for an email from Library 2.0.